Welcome back to another 8 and Chew absolute classic. Today we're in a different setup. I hope you realized. We're back in London. We're using a mic now, which is interesting. I'll see how this works. We got a little Samsung Q2U. Still getting used to holding a mic, because if I speak off to the distance, you're not going to hear it. And so I should be practicing good mic technique. Today's video is about cold exposure and how to use cold exposure to reduce anxiety and, succeed in life in general, right? Because that's ultimately the goal. We want to succeed in life, right? And I'm talking about deliberate cold exposure, right? So in the last video, I talked about stressors. I talked about pain. Pain is a lesson. That's more life stuff, You get rejected by a girl, what can you learn from it, right? But if we're talking more mechanism, if we're talking about more scientific things, cold exposure is one of them, right? Another one being obviously gym, mechanical tension causing micro tears in the muscle, causing myofibrillar or hyperplasia, hypertrophy, all of that. But basically, when there's deliberate cold exposure, your body releases a chemical called norepinephrine and epinephrine. These are proxies for stress and adrenaline, right? Essentially, it's adrenaline. And you get that cold feeling, when you hop in the water and you get that shortness of breath and you start shivering, right? That's your immediate fight or flight response. And that's when those two, norepinephrine and epinephrine, are released, right? So with repeated cold exposure, you begin to build a tolerance to elevated amounts of norepinephrine and epinephrine. Even though it's elevated, acute elevation of norepinephrine, you can still, if you have a tolerance to it, you can still perform cognitively under stress, right? So through repeated exposure, you're going to be improving your mental resilience, i.e., how well you can think under a stressful situation, when norepinephrine and epinephrine is released, right? So you're going to ask me, Aiden, what's the protocol? What should you do, right? A lot of people think, you need to be scientific with it, get a notebook and digital thermometer and be like, okay, today I'm doing 10 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes. Tomorrow I'll progressively overload to 10 degrees in 6 minutes, right? And of course, that's quite good. But you have to realize that throughout the day, you have different levels of resilience, right? Maybe in the morning when you just wake up, you're not in the mood to go in some cold freaking water, right? But maybe throughout the day, you've had your coffee, you've woken up, you're more willing to tackle some cold exposure, right? So using temperature and this quantitative measures such as temperature and duration is not really that good. Whereas Andrew Huberman, the GOAT himself, says about this counting walls protocol. So essentially, a wall is a barricade, or it's a wall that you have to overcome. So you should set in a day, I want to hit this amount of walls in one day. I want to overcome this amount of walls. So one wall could be, in terms of entering cold exposure, deliberate cold exposure, could be just entering the water, right, or being exposed to it. That's one wall. And then maybe you stick it out for a little bit more, 2 minutes later, you're like, damn, I really want to get out. Mentally, you're like, I want to get out. But then you stay in. So that's another wall you overcome. So you treat the walls as reps, right? So maybe in one session, you will overcome 3 walls. Let's say, for example, the number is kind of arbitrary. It's up to you to decide how many walls you want to traverse, right? And what is the reason for using this protocol? This approach, the walls approach, is a bit more realistic, right? Here it says this approach makes it more realistic because in real life, we're not engaging with stressors in fixed time. Most of the stresses come in a form of surprises we don't like, right? We're not going to be like, hold on, I'm going to expose myself to 10 minutes of stress and then just like not be stressed after, right? Because that's the approach with the numbers of like the temperature and the time exposure, right? So it shouldn't be that. But yeah, cold showers, is pretty effective. But I'd say do cold plunge. So I bought this thing called the Lumi therapy. Basically, it's a small barrel, a little pod that you can fill up cold water. And seeing as London is very cold already, the water will just be naturally cold. It'll be like, I don't know, like 20 degrees or something, right? I'll have a thermometer. I'll use this thermometer to get it to a cold-ish degree, right? It doesn't really matter how cold, as I said previously. And I'll buy some ice and I'll do it in the morning every day, right? That's usually what is done, right? And now we talk about mindset during cold exposure. So Dr. Huberman, says there's two different mindsets that you can have. There's potentially more, obviously, but one of them being remain as mentally still as possible. Try to just focus in and just grind it out, Just be like, yo, I'm a beast. I'm going to get this bread today, And that's good. But maybe for me, at least, that won't be the best approach, because if I'm focusing on my brain saying, I'm not cold, I'm going to be thinking about, regardless of that, I'm going to be thinking about temperature, right? Whereas if I engage in another activity, which is the second mindset, engage in some sort of cognitive exercise to maintain clarity of thinking. So, for example, it would be like math problems, thoughts with full sentence structures, recall of a challenging information, something like that. You're training your brain to keep working when the reflex is to shut down parts of your brain involved in planning and thinking, right? Because when you're in fight or flight, you're in fight or flight, right? You're just thinking of running away or fighting, right? But in the real world, that's not the case anymore for the most part. So it's good. It's good. I see some people, they do a Rubik's Cube, or they just start thinking of other things, cognitively challenging things, while at the same time being physically challenged in a state of stress. Obviously cold exposure has its other benefits, reduced inflammation, increased blood flow, and thus, better recovery, acute dopamine increase, mood, focus, all of that. But I'm just talking about building mental resilience, because for me, at least, the recovery part of things, my recovery is decent already. I'm a 20-year-old high test bulking individual, so my recovery is pristine at the moment, and I sleep very good, so not too stressed there. Tell me if you guys, liked this layout of video. Just got a little Chipotle bowl because I just came back from Hong Kong, so I haven't meal prepped anything. See you guys in the next video. Peace.